Excel Toronto Meetup group. We are now in July, and we have Jakob Nielsen joining us from the US, Redmond, straight from the Excel team to teach us about dynamic arrays. I will present Jakob in more detail in a little bit. Before that, let me just go through a couple of announcements. So be mindful that our session is going to be recorded, is being recorded already, and we will upload our recording to our YouTube channel in a couple of days. Those of you who registered will receive an email unless you opted out. But if you have not unsubscribed from emails from me at the Meetup, you will receive an email probably during the weekend or so with a link for the recording, the files that Jakob is going to share with us, and a couple more items of information. So my name is Celia Alves. In case you don't know me, I have been a Microsoft Excel MVP for a couple of years now and created this meetup group back in 2019. It has been more than 6 years now. And it's been a lovely journey. Every month we have, at the moment, we have 2 sessions per month. One more targeted to people who are starting their learning journey in Excel. These are shorter sessions with more of the fundamental topics and features in Excel. And then we have other more we would say expanded, more advanced topics where we look at Excel in connection with other tools. We look at the most recent features and things like that. And with me is Aurora also helping to co-host this session. If you'd like to say hello, Aurora.
Hello, everybody. I am Aurora Sakac. I'm a freelance consultant based in Toronto, providing data analytics using Microsoft products like Excel, Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate. I will be your co-host, posting resources in the chat and monitoring the chat for your questions. So let's learn together today from our guest, Jakob Nielsen.
Thank you. Thank you. And we also have a group of volunteers. Their names are on the screen. A big thank you to them. They help with creating the chapters, the timestamps for the videos, so that when we want to go back to find something we remember we heard, we learned in a session, we need to revisit, it's easier to find that information. So a big thank you to them as well. And our lead sponsor is Sheetcast. Sheetcast is an add-in for Excel that allows you to create web applications out of Excel. It's really cool. You can transform an Excel workbook into something that works online as a web app. I do work for Sheetcast. I joined them in less than a year ago, in October last year. And I've been learning how to work with Sheetcast. We are now delivering training. These workshops are free. Feel free to check the link there on the monitor on the screen and register for one of the sessions with us and learn how it works if you think it's something that you would like to see. We are preparing a session. One of the meetup sessions will be about Sheetcast in the fall, probably in September. We have a couple of other sponsors. So Excel Consulting is my consulting business. MrExcel.com. You all know Mr. Excel's YouTube channel, I believe. Women in Excel is a group on LinkedIn for women who like Excel. I invite you to check that out as well. Our next event will be this month with Bill Jelen, Mr. Excel. He will be presenting about the features in Excel that he says your manager thinks you already know these Excel features. And all of us, or not all of us, but in general, people get hired and for a certain job, and there are Excel expectations that managers have for those professionals, and sometimes those expectations do not meet the reality. And Bill Jelen is going to guide us through some of these features that everybody is supposed to know. and that they are useful for our productivity. Feel free to register for our next session. And then in August, we will be taking a break. So no meetup sessions for the Toronto Meetup group during August. And we will get back to action in September. We have a couple of sessions already lined up for you guys. They are not posted yet. Keep an eye on the website. Other events coming up soon. Bulgaria Excel Days is in October, happening in October in Bulgaria. And if you want to attend, our members have 10% discount. I'm going to post in the chat the code, the link that you can use for 10% off, because it's not a code. A coupon code is just a separate web page from where you can buy your tickets, and that has a reduced price. And you, as a member of the Excel Toronto Meetup group, you also have discount of 20% on all the digital books you get from Mr. Excel's bookstore. I will be posting the link shortly in the chat as well. Or if Aurora has it, she can help. Otherwise, I'll put it after my presentation. The information is also available on the Meetup, on the discussions area. When you log into your Meetup app and go to the discussions area in our Meetup, you will see the information there. And if you are ever looking for help with a specific Excel challenge that you have on hands and you are not being able to figure out, you need some ideas to solve that particular challenge, I recommend mrexcel.com/board. It's an Excel forum where you find people willing to help you with specific questions. I really recommend using that resource. And these are other resources, YouTube channels, newsletters, whatnot. You will receive this information along with the files after the session. You will be able to check all these links. And that's it. So now let's focus on Jakob. Thank you for your patience. And I'd just like to introduce Jakob. He's passionate about helping people become more productive and active and achieve better results with spreadsheets. He is the founder and CEO of Make Digital Solutions apps and principal designer in the Excel team at Microsoft. So Jakob is working with the Microsoft Excel team and has also his own company where he creates a separate a set of separate projects. One of them has been in the emails that I send out every session. After every session, at the bottom there's an add-in called List Filter and List Slicer. Those are two versions of a similar tool. This add-in, I find it very useful, especially if you need to constantly filter lookup tables. If you have table with information and you are constantly needing to filter that table to find specific rows, it saves you a lot of time. It works for tables, for pivot tables, and for cell ranges with filters applied. And today, Jakob is going to teach us about dynamic arrays, which are a fundamental tool that he used to create another new add-in that I believe he will have some time at the end to tell us a little bit about it as well. So, Jakob, thank you so much for making the time to be with us today, for preparing the session for us, and please fill in the gaps of anything I may have missed about you in the introduction, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Celia, and thank you for Aurora for hosting me today, and thanks everyone for having me in your meetup. I'm delighted to be here. Let me just share my screen, but before I can do that, Celia, can you make me a presenter?
Sure. Let's do that. Just a second. Jakob. Make a presenter. Yeah, I need to start make my settings differently. Okay, there you go. You should be able to do that now.
That's perfect. What you should be seeing in a second here is the PowerPoint. We'll get out of PowerPoint very quickly. Celia did an excellent job introducing me. I work 3 days a week at Microsoft. I've been there for quite a while. I've been more than a decade in the Excel team. And 2.5 years ago, I decided to become part-time and focus the remaining time of my week on working on projects closer to customers. And most of what I do is developing Excel add-ins, and List Slicer and List Filter that Celia mentioned are the two first add-ins that I have in the marketplace. I also have 2 projects that I'm working on right now that are new add-ins that are not yet available in the marketplace. And I actually want to, just as a motivation for this session, give you a glimpse into one of those add-ins that I am developing. And because that really was part of motivating me to come here and give an introduction to dynamic arrays, because I think that that's really for using this particular add-in and achieving the benefits from it, it's really a prerequisite that you know about how to use dynamic arrays and in Excel. And I don't want to go deep into the demo here, but this is a visualization of the Lego catalog, and it's all done in Excel. All of these things that you see are things on the Excel grid produced by the add-ins, but it's Excel sort of artifacts and formatting and so on. And it's a little interactive demo where you, for example, can see, you can filter this to see what are the architecture sets from 2015 or 2014 and 15 and so on. And that all sort of lays out and reformats what you see. We can go in and look at, the Atlantis theme, a different theme in Lego. Hopefully that will come right up. And so on. And the add-in used here is called Flow, and it's an add-in that can be used to sort of automate your formatting and layout workflows so that you can quickly create stunning reports and dashboards and visualizations in Excel. I'll get back to that, but that's what primarily motivated me to come here and give an introduction to dynamic arrays. And this really will be quite an introduction. We'll start from the very basics of this and work our way up in describing, what are dynamic arrays, why do they matter, and how do they work. And then hopefully we'll have time at the end to come back and look at how can the Flow add-in be used. And there's an open invitation to collaborate with me on actually making that particular add-in. So the first part, dynamic arrays. Dynamic arrays has been in Excel for, I would say, about 5 years now. We introduced it in Excel in 2019. And it's quite a significant update to the core experience of Excel. And that is because these things called dynamic arrays, they do automatically spill the result across the grid, and we'll look at that, and they resize automatically. And that's very different from what we had before then, where we had this Control-Shift-Enter or CSE arrays that weren't dynamic, and they had this weird shortcut that you needed to, keyboard shortcut that you needed to use when you were using one of those arrays. Part of dynamic arrays is also that there's just a large set of new functions that were introduced to Excel as part of this, such as filter, sorting, unique, sequence, and so on. That's all functions that we will look at during this presentation. So here's sort of a table of contents for my presentation. I have some fundamentals of key concepts that I want to start explaining to begin with, and I'll use Excel for that. And then there's a catalog of different things that you can do with dynamic arrays. For example, you can generate them from scratch, you can shape them, you can combine them, you can query them, and then you can also do things that loops through an array. And I'm not gonna, all of the functions are covered in my PowerPoint deck and in the Excel workbook that we'll share after the session. But I have way more content than I have time to present, and I also want to make sure that there's time for your questions. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them in this presentation. I'll pick some, and then if there's questions that leads us to look at other things, we'll go do that. I hope that's okay. So
Sure.
Let me just switch. Are there any questions before we get started?
No questions so far.
That's good.
Thank you.
But do ask questions. Chime in on the chat, and then we'll find a good moment to answer those. The workbook that we're going to share, and I will use for the demos today, is an Excel workbook that is basically one worksheet that sort of covers each topic. And there's a little table of contents that you can use for navigating the whole thing. And I really hope that this, together with the presentation, you'll use that as kind of a compendium afterwards for inspiration about what you can do with dynamic arrays. But let's take a look at the first topic. All of these pages are kind of following the same pattern. There's some, a part with some sample data at one side, and then there is examples of how to use the different functions. And then if you need to sort of follow along in what is it that I'm actually writing into the grid, you can see that here on the right. So the very first thing is that what exactly is a dynamic array? And let me just delete this. If the most basic thing for is that you can just reference with a formula a range in the grid. So I could take this range and reference that, B5 to E7, and put that into a cell. What you'll see is that it's sort of the result is the same thing as we have on the left, but it sort of spills out across the grid. It's not only in that cell H5. It spills out. That is a dynamic array, and you can also see that Excel sort of shows that with a border around it and a little bit of a shadow to sort of indicate that this is something that was spilled across the grid. Then I can take an array here, and this is an array that sits in B11. That's an array that I generated. I'll talk to you later about how to generate that array. Here's some tricky parts. One thing is that if I reference that cell, B11, I will just get the value of that cell. That's maybe not what you expect, but that's how it's been for a very, very long time in Excel. So we sort of kept that behavior. However, if I append my reference B11 with a pound sign or pound character or a hashtag character, it will actually reference the array and then spill it out over the grid. And that's a really important thing in referencing these arrays. There's also something around the spill behavior where you can get this pound spill error. And that's what I have in this particular thing. And the reason for that is that if I remove the reference here, you can see that there's some content here within that range that I wanted to spill in. So if I say B11 and then pound, that will reference the array, I get that spill error. And that's because there's some cells here that are obstructing the spill. And the way I can deal with that is that on this little menu, there is an item here that says select the obstructing cells. And oh, here you go. That's the cells that are obstructing. Maybe it's not as easy to find as it is here. In other cases, it may be more difficult, but now you have that function to select what is obstructing. And of course, I can delete those, press the delete key, and it will actually show the entire unspilled array. And I can undo and go back and so on. So that's sort of the basics of what is a dynamic array and how do you reference it, and in particular this notion that you use the pound sign to reference the entire array instead of just the first cell in the array. Recently, we've added a function that's sort of a helper when it comes to referencing arrays, and that's the trim range function. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to use that, but oftentimes you have content in Excel, and you may have things like at the bottom of your range or at the sides that you don't really want to use in your calculation. Or maybe you want to adapt this so that when people add new content or you add new content at the end of a range, it will automatically be taken into account in the calculation. And that's what the trim range function is doing for you. So here's an example of trim range. Basically, I can say trim range and then point to the entire range. When I do that, it sort of takes leading and trailing rows and columns and removes those from the array. So the first row here is gone. The first row is gone. The first column is gone. The last row and the last column is gone from the output. Super convenient. And if I go and add something at the end, you can see that that is then added to the end of the result automatically. And there's different variants of this. There's some parameters that says, hey, do you want to remove from the beginning or from the end, and so on. And there's also, for convenience, a trim reference, which is basically the same as using the function. It's just way shorter, where you can say, go to B8 and then put a dot in, which means that it will remove leading empty cells, and then a dot after the colon, and then you go to the end here, which means that it will remove trailing cells from the reference. And this is mostly as a convenience so that you can sort of make your formulas be shorter and so on. Great. The next concept that is important to know is a concept around lifting, because we do some interesting things in Excel that when we are dealing with dynamic arrays. And one of those things is that if you have a formula where you take, let me just delete this, you take an array, and we just learned that we can take an array by putting in a reference and the pounds, B6 pound, that is the array. You can see it marks that. But if I put in an operator and put in a scalar value, I can actually, that will get applied to all of the cells in the array. So the result here is like 1 plus 5, 6, 2 plus 5, 7, and so on for the entire array. That's one example. Another example of this is taking functions that you think of as only taking one single value, like for example, the lower function here, that will also get kind of applied to all of the items in the array. So I can, in one formula, apply that function across the entire array. And here's one that's really interesting, because this is the result here is maybe a little bit unexpected, that you can take two arrays, and I'll take, for example, this array that I have here in the rows, and I append that or concatenate that with this array here. And what I get is sort of pairwise application of the concatenation operator. So that's a little bit about lifting and some other concept around, broadcasting and also pairwise applying the operators that you need to know when you work with dynamic arrays.
Jakob, we have
yes.
a question if you are going to move on to the next, and it's probably something you can either reply now, or maybe you have examples in the next functions for this question. So Henry Chen is asking, usually when we reference a dynamic array in a function, we get a dynamic array result, but not always. Some functions won't deal with dynamic arrays as expected. Why such limitations?
What function is it that you are thinking about here? Is there a specific function you are thinking about?
While Henry comes up on the mic, I can give you an example. For example, if you can you go to where you were just now, the reference and spill, I think it was the sheet, or lifting. Yeah. So for example, where you have B6 plus 5, if we put sum of B6 pound plus, and then 5, we'll
create
only get.
That's a good point. That if I did that, I can try and say the sum of my array B6, and then that it will sum up the array.
Yeah, and even if you put comma 5, it will add 5 to 21 now. If you add comma 5 at the end, because sum is a function that is already prepared to receive a group of cells. And to produce a unique result. So that's one of the scenarios. I'm not sure if Henry has something to add to the question.
The one place I'm really glad that question came up, because one of the places that's really tricked me a number of times is working with the AND function, and especially with filters, like the AND function.
Yes, and or are other functions like that.
Yeah. And that's where you need to not for those cases with filter, and we'll look at filter later on. For those cases, you have to do something else than using the AND or the OR functions to make things work.
Yes. So we will wait until you get there if you have the time. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Henry says that he will wait. He will take another example later.
Yeah.
And Barb Henderson is asking if the pound sign works with VBA or in VBA. Can we reference this?
That's a really good question. I will have to come back on that. I know that there was properties added to VBA so that you can inspect a cell and see if there's a spilled array in that cell. And I would think that there's also a way then to retrieve that spilled array from that cell, or at least get information enough so that you can get the range that it's spilled into. if that
That
answers
can be
the
helpful.
question.
Yes.
Yeah. But there is definitely properties that you can go inspect the cell to see if there's a dynamic array there. And I think also, like as I said, how to get the spell range.
Is there a way, so Baljit is asking, is there a way of using an array as a source for pivot tables?
Unfortunately, not for pivot tables, but there is for the function group by and pivot by.
Yes.
They would do it, but pivot tables, I don't believe that we have that support yet. But let me follow up on that, because that's something that may be even under development to do that.
I would suggest, if needed for a pivot table, one way could be to use Power Query first to generate a table, because Power Query can have a dynamic array, a stilled array as a source, and then load the query as a table or load the query directly as a pivot table. And when refreshing, it should update according to the array. That's
but
a little bit of a workaround. Yeah,
it's a very good question, and I think it's great suggestion to use Power Query, because you're right that you can take a dynamic array and point Power Query at it and use that to get a data source for a pivot table.
Yeah, and
is it okay if I move along?
Yes, we have just a confirmation from JP Bagel. He's saying that he tried on VBA range of C7 pound.cells.count, and it returned the right answer. So
awesome.
It seems there's some support on VBA. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes, please.
Thank you, JP.
We have a lot of great questions.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the program here, and now we are sort of going into these 5 different topics around, like, how can you actually work with dynamic arrays. And the first thing that's sort of interesting is, how do I even generate one? And there's 3 functions: sequence, rand array, and make array, that can be used to generate an array from scratch. And I'm just going to take the most simple one of them, which is sequence, and show you that. And in this particular case, I have 3 applications of that. One is just generating a sequence across rows. So it is basically just equal sequence. And then how many rows do I want? I want 5 rows. I get 5 numbers. I can do that in columns as well. 1 row, 10 columns. And then what I can also do is control where does the numbering start. In this case, I want to start at 10. And what should my increment or step be? And that's it too. So that's a very easy way to just, if you want to have a sequence of numbers, or even dates and so on, you can use the sequence function. Of course, you can get more advanced here and generate random numbers. If you want 5 random numbers, you can use rand array 5. You get that. Again, that's also highly customizable. You can specify a minimum value you want and a maximum value, and then also, do you want integer numbers or numbers with fractions in that. Make array is super advanced, because that uses a lambda function. So you use a function, define a function inside of the function to specify what do you want in each of the cells. So let me just look at this for a second. I want to generate a 5 by 5 array, and I want each of the cells to be the product of the row number and the column number. And that's how I specify that with a lambda function. This is not an introduction to Lambda functions, so I'm just going to leave it there for a second for you to study that. So that was generating arrays from scratch. Shaping an array is taking an array and sort of putting it into a different format than what you already have. And there's a number of functions there that does different manipulations. One of the more interesting ones are the wrap calls and wrap rows, which basically takes an array that we have here, and wrap calls basically wraps that in columns. So in this particular case, it says take the B7 array, B7 hash, and make columns out of that with 3 items in every column, and pad with a certain value. And I can, of course, go in and change that and say, hey, I want 4, and then I get 4 as well with the same values. And there's a different version of that called wrap rows. Instead of doing columns, it would wrap the rows, but it works in a similar way. That can be useful when you want to present data in not just a long string, but it's something that's more compact. Let me go see the take and drop. This is where you want to slice something out of an array. You can use the take function that will take an array and basically take a number of rows or columns out of the array. So for example, this top one just takes 2 rows out of the array. In this particular case, it takes the 2 last columns. So if you use negative numbers in the take function, it will go from the end. The drop function will skip rows. So in this particular case, it will drop 1 row from the top of the array. That may be useful if you have a row of headers at the top and you don't want that row of headers. You can use the drop function. And here's a case where it takes and removes 2 columns from the end. That's take and drop. Let me just show you, I think we have enough to show maybe a more complete example. So I have this Excel casino example here that I just want to show you. This is basically in my casino example here. I want to show how to basically shuffle a deck of cards. And the first thing I need to go do is, make the deck of cards. And I don't know if you recall when I talked about lifting, that I could actually let me just make this a little larger so you can actually see it. I want to take the array that I have up here, and I want to broadcast that across this one. So basically, in just one formula, I get the entire deck of cards. And then, of course, I can take that deck of cards and I can transform that to just one column. And we didn't talk about that, but there's a 2-column shaping function that takes any array and just puts it in one column. So that's what I have here. Then I have a random array of numbers that basically takes all the rows that I have in this one and generates a random number for each. And then I can sort that by that random number. So now I have them all sorted. And then finally, in one formula over here, I can say, take all of the shuffled, take the on rows, wrap all of the shuffled cards with a wrap count of how many players I have And also, if there's no value, just put in none as the value. So one formula, and it basically did not do what I wanted to do because I needed to use the wrap calls function instead. And that's how it takes all of the cards and distributes that across 4 players. And of course, I can go and change that to 5, and they get fewer cards, and some doesn't get all enough cards, and so on. So that's a little bit of an example of how I can do something that's fairly complex, but in just a sequence of array formulas. Any questions at this time?
I was
That's
muted,
good.
sorry. No
That's
questions.
good.
Yes, just Henry mentioning he likes the padding parameter for the functions. The function that you just showed, the wrap rows and wrap calls. Yeah, it's very useful.
That is pretty useful. Okay, let's look at combining an array is fairly simple. This is just taking 2 arrays and either stacking them vertically with the vstack function or horizontally with the 8stack function. And you can see that it sort of accommodates for missing values here with NA or not applicable. That's useful in some cases, especially if you're if you have several results and you want to put them together. Those are the functions that you can use for that. Let's look at querying an array, and this gets a little bit more complicated, so to speak. But for example, here I have an array where there's duplicates, and I don't want those duplicates. Let's say that I want, for example, to feed something into a drop-down list for data validation. I just want the unique values. That's where the unique function comes in. I can take the array that I have here and put that into unique, and I get the unique values. Unique has an extra parameter or a couple of extra parameters. You could do it by column, but you could also say, I just want the unique values, but only the ones that occur exactly once, and that's sort of a shorter list. So that's an example of querying an array. Of course, there's a possibility to sort. We've already seen that, so I'll skip that for now. Well, we can look at sort by, which I think is interesting because, of course, there's sort that will just sort the array by the value in the array. But you can also sort by a different vector than the one that's the first column in the array. So sort by takes 2 things. First, it takes the array that I want to sort. And so this is my array that I want to sort. And I want to sort that by the second. So I'm pointing out a second array with here. Doesn't need to be part of that first array. And then I need to specify the sort order. I can specify the sort order, for example, descending. And then you could continue, and if you have more criteria, you could specify those as well. And that basically gives you a sorted list here. And I can go, of course, and change that and say, hey, I want to have it in ascending order instead. And I get that. So that is the sort by. Moving on, filter is a super useful function as well, somewhat more complicated. To explain this, let me try to build a filter function. This is not the best slide here, but I have some data in a table. And I want to create sort of a filtered view on where I filter the category of the table. So I only get the category of bikes. And So my filter function first takes what is it that I want to filter. And in this case, I have the sales table. I can reference that, all the rows in that table, by just using the name of the table. And then the second argument here is a vector that says, do I want to include something from that? Do I want to include each and every, for each row, do I want to include it or not? And let me just show that for a second before I do the complete one. And that's the row that I want to use. So the expression I want to use is sales, and then take the category. And I want to do that where the category equals bikes. So that gives me an array of true and false, and it actually gave me a spell error because I have some content down here. So let's just for a second remove this so you can see. And if we go check, the first result up here is false because the category is clothing, but it's actually true down here because it's bikes, and for the next one it's also true. So this vector is kind of the include vector. It says for every row, is this row included or not in the end result? And I can take that expression and wrap it in filter and say filter the whole table with that criteria, with that vector, and it does the trick for me and does the filtering. And this is where it was a little bit tricky, right? Because you could feel that if I want to have more than one criteria, and let me build that for you. So let's go down here and say I want the criteria to be, if it's bikes, I want to have an and like this, and then say sales, and this will not work. I just warn you about that. The amount is larger than 5,000, like this, okay? That will not give me a vector. It will just give me a false, just one, because for all of the different entries in that it's processing and combining it will just give false. So in order to get a vector here that I can actually use, I need to do this. I need to take that first expression there and then multiply it with the next expression. And then I get a pound value, that's not what I wanted. So let me just do this to see if that actually is better. And now you see that I have a vector here that actually has zeros and ones in it. And I can pass that on to filter, wrap that in filter and say filter my sales table with that. So, and then I get the desired results, which is all the ones that were in the category of bikes with an amount that is larger than 5,000. And that's kind of what we were thinking about earlier, or talking about earlier, that some functions give a result it's always done that. It's always taking a range of things and then combine that. But for filtering, it just doesn't work, and you need to use the product instead. Okay. Let me skip, or really not skip, but just go further and say this was about what you can do to query. Another very useful function is called XLOOKUP. I hope many of you are familiar with that, so I won't cover that. Then there's a group of super powerful functions that can be used to loop through an array. The most basic function is map, which applies a function to every single item in the array. And there's reduce, which produces one value out of the entire array, and then scan. And I'll drop into scan because that leads me to talk about the last example that I have. The scan function is super interesting because it can take an array of values. I have an array of values here, and then it can apply a function to each of those items and then return all of the different sort of interim calculations. So in this particular case, I'm saying, take the array start out with a value of B7. So this is the 15 here. Take the array in B9, and then apply the function that basically takes the previous value that I had, and then take the current value and add those two together. And that is what you see as part of the accumulator plus value that we have here. So again, this is using a lambda function. I'll leave that, if I'm not familiar with lambdas already, I'll leave that for your self-study or maybe a topic for another meetup. But basically what this produces is, in one formula, it can create a running total. And there's a shortcut on this, which gets even more technical because it uses something called eta lambdas. And in this particular case, it just uses sum, because that's really the same thing that I'm doing up here, but it produces the same result. Since we're a little bit pressed on time, I want to go look at an example about like how that is useful, and where dynamic arrays really demonstrates the power. Because a lot of calculations in Excel looks like this. Like you have a set of periods, some movements, and then you want to figure out like what is the ending total for a period, or what is the change for a period, what is the ending total, and what is the beginning total for every period. And traditionally
Jacob,
in Excel, you would have done, yeah?
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm not sure if you you were saying you were pressed on time. We still have 30 minutes.
Okay.
So we have time for questions and yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, I completely miscalculated that then. That's awesome.
Yeah, we have like 35 minutes. So
okay, then we can spend a little bit more time on looking at this corkscrew.
Yes,
and the reason why it's called a corkscrew, and I'll just point your attention to this little thing that sits here at the bottom, and we can make this a little larger, is because this is how it would traditionally have been done. And you probably, if you're an Excel user, have done many of those. Like what you do is that you take the first column here, and then you do like the D7 plus D8 to get the change. You say, okay, my opening balance for that is the C12, so that comes up here. And then you say the ending balance is the opening balance plus the change, and so on. And then you start copying over the formulas, and that creates this corkscrew, winding pattern all across the sheet. And that's kind of course you'll get it right, but there's also times where you don't get it right, and maybe you insert a row here, and then you didn't get all of the formulas updated, and so on. And this is where dynamic arrays just are extremely useful and effective, because I can actually do this with dynamic arrays in just 3 formulas. So what I'll do is, in my example, is I'll just reset this for a second, and then show you how to do that with the 3 formulas. So where I start out is that I want to compute the change in a given period. And I do that by, well, I don't even need to do the sum because I can just say reference my incoming, the array. So the pound sign, you see it selected them all, and use the plus sign, and then take the outcoming and use the pound sign, and it takes them all again. And when I hit enter, I get the whole row. No copy over or anything. I just have one formula. There's no formulas in any of the other cells. And if I change that formula, it'll get updated all across the board. And then, and this is a little trick here. I want to use the scan function because I really just want to have a running total across my sheet here. So I say scan with the initial value that I have in the first cell here, and the array I want to sum up is this one. Use the pound sign to get them all, and then the function I'll use is just the sum function. I don't need to specify parameters or anything because it's just adding the previous value plus the current value, adding those together. So with that, and it's built across, I now have all the ending balances for the periods. And then finally, what I can do is, in order to get the beginning balance, this is maybe a little bit the other way around from what you would usually do. I could just take the ending balance and then I think I need to add I take the ending balance, all of them, and then I just add the change. Oh, actually I subtract the change, of course. And the change is right here in that row. And that's how I get to my result. Without it is the corkscrew in terms of the calculations, but I'm not having 12 times 3 formulas to maintain anymore. I just have 3 of them. I think we can take a question at the moment.
I don't think there's questions that were not unanswered. Someone was asking before about not being possible to use the unique function in the data validation dialog window. So if we try to put in the rule there, to add the range for data validation for a drop-down, for example, to say unique of this column.
Oh, really?
It will not accept it. So we will have to put in the formula in a cell, for example, and then refer to that cell and then pound sign at the end.
Yeah, I know that the data validation may be one of those places that are not like fully updated. Just to go back, it's what you're talking about is that let's do this. Let's try to do a data validation based on this one, and that data validation here. I want to have a list, and this is where you would expect that I could just say unique of B6 to B25, right? That was the question, really, right?
Yes.
And this is not possible, right? And because that evaluates to an error. So what you need to do is instead say something like this little trick where you say define a name that says
you cannot even you can do that, but you can also avoid defining the name, Well, depends on your situation. You can, if you in the data validation, just go ahead and do that, and then I'll say, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I think I think I get what you're saying is that yeah, okay. What I would do is I would define a name that says categories or categories, and that has refers to something here, and then I would go to the field here, go to data validation, say I want to have a list and equal categories. So that would be my go-to way of doing that. Of course, there was
You
something
forgot the
I
pound sign.
forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot something, and that is that I need to have a pound sign here. And when I do that and I go back, I have the list. Yeah. What was it that you wanted to do?
So instead of creating the name, the formula that you put in the name, unique of H6 pound, I believe if you put it directly in, no, sorry, if you, instead of creating the name, you say H6 pound on the data validation, I believe it works. Can you try that?
Yes, I can definitely try that. That would be super interesting to see if that works. So let's do the list again and say H6 pound, but not use the, then we're not using the unique directly.
The unique, exactly.
Yeah, and then you have the list there. So that's the trick. So unfortunately, yes, you still need to have sort of a reference sheet somewhere that holds that list, and then use the formulas in the grid on that. I want to say that in cases where you really feel that Excel should do something else, I really encourage you to send feedback to Microsoft. And you don't always need to give a compliment, but you could say, make a suggestion, or even in this particular case, I actually think it's a problem, but report it as a problem to us. And we do look at that as part of our work, and do check that we may contact you so that we can follow up if we have questions. I really encourage you to use that if you haven't already used that for things that you dislike in Excel.
In the help column, in the help tab.
It's in the help tab, and then it's called the feedback. We oftentimes refer to this report a problem as send a frown or send a smile, but it's basically just the feedback. This is looked at by the team on a daily basis. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, CWC is asking, in which case scan requires Lambda function inside?
In which cases do we require Lambda functions? Well, definitely if we go back and look at this, all of these are things that will require a Lambda function in order to work. So if we didn't look at map, but we looked at scan, like that required a Lambda function that you define it. You say, as you're doing the scan, here's the function I want you to apply to each of the items in the array. And that is the same concept. That's the same thing for all of these. They take Lambda functions.
So let us know if that answered your question. Henry Chen is asking, in this example, I believe he's referring to the corkscrew example. The key is to get the in and out rows from a dynamic lookup of a detailed data table of thousands of individual items.
Yes.
How do we generate these two rows? Let us know if I'm referring to the right example.
Yeah, okay. So the question as I hear it is, let's say that
the
we
in
have
and out. Okay, yeah.
let's say that we have a sales table that has the values for the in and out, or something like that, or transactions table that has that. How do I get each of those rows in there? Well, since we have time, we could work on this together. I think, any suggestions about where we would start?
You were asking if
Yeah, I'm asking, any, like, we could how would I start out?
for the in row.
In and out.
Yeah.
Building on something that we've talked about here.
The two row maybe, depending on where your data is as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking that we could go back and look at what we've done. Because this example here, we filtered to a certain category, bikes, right? So let's imagine that we said, okay, in my corkscrew, I want to have bikes as the first one up here. And I want in to be basically, going back to filter, the sum of this. So let me just for being a little bit more, maybe so that you can see the example. Here's the data from the transaction table, right? So in this particular case, it takes and filters that table and takes all of the bikes. I just want the sum of this, and that is actually column 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, actually, we didn't talk about that, but we could just say this one, take that array and drop the first 4 columns of that. So that gives me this thing, right? And then I can say take this and just take the first one there. Oops, that's not right. That was a row I got, but if I put in a comma here, I'll get that. And then finally, I can say sum that up and put that in. And that gives me then the sum of, again, remember this, that one gives me the sum of that. So putting all of that together in one formula, and let me just do that right here. Sorry. Take this formula, and then I need to go take this. And what was it that I had at the end? It was times 4, and then I dropped 1 at the end, right? That, and then, oops, sorry about that. I can sum that up. Okay, so now I have this the sum of sales for all bikes. Instead of the take drop, I could also have used a choose call, but since we haven't talked about that, I'm just using take and drop in this example. I can take that and then basically go to the corkscrew again, and then put that in. And then instead of this, I can refer to this. And let me just see if that would work. That's interesting, right? And it gives me a pound value. Why does it give me a pound value? Probably because of this. Yeah. So that's an example of using the functions here to go query the transaction table and getting a result out of the transaction table.
Yeah, there was another question about the same example, the same exercise, corkscrew. Jeff is asking if there's a way, I lost here. If you only wanted to show 6 months instead of all 12, would this array formula still work? Can you tell Excel that you only want to see X number of months and then the dynamic arrays only show those months?
Yeah, but not. I need to think about that a little bit more, but I think that what we basically did, I think it was, where was it that we did that? It's basically in this reference. You could actually, that if you change this thing here, I'm referencing these as arrays, right? But if you had, you could actually just basically say take and then only take 5. It will only do. It will only be 5. Well, take 5. That's 5 rows. Take 5 columns, right? So you can, in that's one way of limiting what you see here.
Yes, or use the sequence for in some scenarios is also useful, where you say the date where to start and how many days or periods you want after that starting value. And you
it's
can
a little
even
bit of a challenge yourself to not to try to come up with a formula instead of just copying formulas across the sheet, right? Because that's typically what we do, but they're not very dynamic. They're very static, and they're also prone to errors. Let me take one question before I continue my talk.
I don't think there's more questions. There were a couple of comments. Someone was asking about the Excel Labs. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the Excel Labs add-in, and wondering if when it would get better to use with dynamic array or with spilled arrays.
Yeah, I can't. Excel Labs is, you're right, that's an add-in. I actually do have it installed. It's super useful for writing complex formulas and so on, because it just provides a better editor for that. So if you haven't already used it, I would definitely encourage you to use that. It's something that we continue to develop on. But I can't speak to specific plans for when what things are coming or that. Again, I would, if you have things that you want to have improved in Excel Labs, again, do use the send feedback and report to us through that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let me just switch gears a little bit and go over to the presentation mode for a second, and then want to give you a brief demo of the flow add-in, the one we saw earlier. And this is a project that I have worked on for a while together with a number of Excel users. And the idea here is basically create a tool that makes it a lot easier to create great reports and visualizations on the Excel grid. And you saw one example of that with the Lego catalog. So the quest here is to figure out how to boost the productivity by automating the task of laying out data and formatting that data. so it can be done faster and with higher quality, and really eliminate all of those repetitive tasks that you do with copy paste and the format painter and resizing rows and columns and so on. A goal is also to make it familiar and easy to learn, and that's maybe one of the things that where we're not exactly there, because it sort of introduces some concepts that may be a little bit hard to grasp and is a little bit abstract. But let me give you a demo so that you see how things like this, for example, is created. And what I'll do is basically start from scratch with some data. In this particular case, it's a selection of the Lego sets again. And I want to create on this page my catalog. So I'm just creating a page that I call catalog. And then for the setting up this, I'm creating a sheet that I call my flow. And the way this works is that, first of all, I need to get a sample of the data, because I'm going to reference that as I'm working on this. So this is, let me just put it right out here. This is my data sample. Every single row that I want to lay out has this data. And then I start in typical Excel fashion to actually create a template. So I want the name. I want it a little bit larger. I want it in bold. Under that, I want to have the number of the set, and I also want to have an image, and I have the in my sample data, I have the image for the sets. So there's the Titanic. It's tiny, and I can make it a little bit larger. Let me just zoom this in so that you can see what's going on. I want to make that larger, and at the end of this, I want to make a note that this is from this year, and it has this number of parts in it. So I'm just writing that as a formula. So, and now I sort of have one of them laid out. Still not exactly what I want, so I'm doing some additional formatting here to get it right. I want to put a box around the whole thing, and I want this to be the Lego color, and so on. So this is my template, but I still don't have a catalog yet. And of course, I could start copying, pasting, and so on that across the whole sheet here. So, but instead I'm using the flow add-in, and flow is basically a set of functions that lets you define templates. So I'm defining a template. This is my template. And the second step here is I want to take that template, and this is where it's using a new trick called dot functions that we just recently introduced. And I can take that template and say I want to wrap that in rows with 5 on each row. And that creates my layout. Then I take my layout and point to data. So this is my sets, my Lego sets that I use as the data. And then finally, I take the flow here and I generate that out to the page called catalog in B2, because I want to start my catalog in B2. And when I hit enter on this and wait for a second, things got modeled up for some reason. Let me just figure out. There was some mistake made here. Flow.template B6 to C. That looks right, but I want to have the sample data range. Let me just point to that. And there you go. So there was just a small bug in my setup here, but this is set up. It's not perfect yet, but instead of fixing it here, I'll actually go and make some small modifications to my template. I may want to have this be in italic and so on, but when I regenerate this, it will change it across the thing here. And of course, if I go change my data and say, this is actually not this is not the Hello Tower, it's the Eiffel Tower, or I can remove the football stadiums from the list. That is then all updated in my catalog. And of course, you don't really see how this relates to dynamic arrays maybe, but of course, when I need to give it the data, I could use the functions. So I could say, I only want it for the first 10 sets, and that will just give me 2 rows of things. Or I want to apply a specific filter before I put it into this into the flow, and that will all react to that. So that's just a little glimpse into something that I'm doing development on. The the flow add-in is actually available in the marketplace, but as a hidden add-in, and that's because it's not done yet, but it's good enough to actually be used in real use cases. So if you are interested in trying it out or working with me on seeing how it can be used on your data, there's an open invitation for you to take part of that. How you get in is just send me an email and we'll figure it out from there. One thing I can offer you is to actually do the first flow for you. So you have a specific use case and some sample data. I can create this mock-up that shows the data. It's like maybe 1 or 2 hours of your time and to do a thing like that. But you can also just get a link to the add-in and then on your own.
Yeah, I can see a number of nice examples. For example, having a full list of products, and then each client wants to order just a certain category or a certain number of a certain collection of items. If you have filters that the user can select, but just bikes, for example, like your data set before, then and have your flow refer to the result of that filtering, then it just automatically generates the catalog for that specific request.
Exactly. And what you're mentioning is basically what we were looking at to begin with, because this is dynamically looking at a set of filters. In this case, it's slices that I used, and then doing the layout. And this can do quite advanced things. You can nest these things. So for example, the flow that's set up here actually has the ability to go and include a flow inside of a flow. And using a dynamic array formula, this is actually producing something where for each of the sets, it is actually finding the numbers of related sets from the same year. So in this particular case, there are at least 4 other sets in architecture from 2011. And that is actually what it's showing here. But for 2019, there's just two of them, and so on, right? So you can create quite advanced layouts. I'm having one of the Excel users that are working with me is using this for visualizing sales data. So they have the products, the top selling products, but then for each of those products, they show the top selling variants of that product in a very visual and engaging way. And it's all based on, one person producing the report, but then sharing that with others so that they can set their own filters and so on. And they don't need to worry about like how to set up the flow or anything. It just works for them.
That's wonderful. I see here Henry says, I may have a potential use case for flow.
Yeah.
It is about the dynamic visualization of a retail product placements on shelves where
Yes.
both product selection and shelf configurations are dynamic.
Yeah.
Currently, the visualization is done by hard coding several designs of different shelf configurations, not dynamic at all.
Yeah.
Will Flow work with this use case?
I think the answer is, let's take a look. So send me email and we'll take it from there. Look at the data and then look at the use case and figure out what it can do. I think that sounds like a very interesting use case for it.
Yeah. Okay. Any
Good.
other questions?
I think this time we are about to run out of time.
Yes, we are just at the right time.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you all for your attention and the great and very relevant questions. And again, there's some contact information for me. You can use LinkedIn, and you can also contact me on my makedigitalsolutions.dk DK address. Either way is good.
Yes, thank you so much, Jakob. And also the workbook you created. It can be a very good resource for people who are starting with dynamic arrays. They can go through each one of the functions with very simple examples and then build from there. I also pasted in the chat a couple of previous sessions we had about Lambda. We also had a session about the Excel Labs add-in. So if anyone is interested in that, you can explore those previous sessions. We have a lot of valuable content on our YouTube channel by this point, because of all these years of great presentations like yours, where people come and share, and then it gets recorded. We can go back to them anytime. Thank you for putting so much care in preparing the session in such an organized way and clean way, and such a nice flow.
Thank you.
Both
Pun intended.
the add-in and literally.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jakob.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Any other questions or comments finally? And we are about to wrap up here. A lot of thank you notes I see there in the chat for you, Jakob. And thank you everyone for joining and for taking the time. I know that some of you were awake until very late in your time zone. So thank you for making the time to be with us live. It really is awesome to have you interact with us. And the session will be live very soon, published very soon on YouTube. So you can go back to it, and we will send the exercise files as well. All right. Everything is good. No more questions. And thank you for your time, Jakob.
Thank you.
Have a good night, a good day, everyone, depending on where you are.
See you at the next session.
Yes, and the next session, yes, will be Bill Jelen. I was trying to disconnect the call in the button I see in your screen, Jakob. That's not the. Okay.
Yeah, that's typical.
Yes.
Teams.
Okay, ending the session here. See you soon for our last session before the summer break. Bye, everyone.